I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. And all will be lost. All will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
Welcome, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm your host, Clint. With me today is Daniel. Christian Remedy and Law is the channel on YouTube that you can go to and listen to some of his fantastic videos. I apologize again today. I'm still suffering from a little bit of pain, actually a lot of pain, and I'm trying to just, get through it without drugging myself. So I'm a little bit, I'm still a little bit off, and I apologize for that. I'm going to ask that Daniel kind of run the show tonight more for me. But anyway, welcome to the show, Daniel. Thanks for joining me again this week.
I'm glad you're having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight, and kind of decided to go back again to the sort of to the childhood stage and the concept that you're born naked and you die naked without any of those, titles and nobilities and debts and all of those things that come after you're born into this world, from God into nature. And a good example that Daniel was talking about, I thought would be a good way to start off the conversation today, is the Native American Indians. Now, all of a sudden you had all these people coming along, and they're in these, strange clothes, and they have these strange customs, and they're coming onto your land, and they're making claims and demands and asking you to sign papers, and gosh, you don't know what the heck's going on here. So, in a way, the infant mind is very much like what the Indian mind was, not in a bad way, just innocent in a way that could be taken advantage by the encroaching of civilization of the slave colonies of America, the penal colonies. And so it's actually a good example, because here's a bunch of people that did not recognize title to land. They just recognized the land itself. They did not recognize that they had a corporate name that they did business under. They really recognized themselves as men with a certain reputation, and if that reputation was flawed, the rest of the group, the rest of the tribe, would know about it. So, I mean, really, it's a similar type of situation, and we all know what has become of those people who had inhabited this land way before any of us did. So Daniel, you've got what's the tribes up there that you have?
Well, there's a number of them. There's Mohawk. They're closer to the Canadian-U.S. border. There's been lots of disputes happening where there was no treaty on certain things, and then it caused major problems where the government was not able to enforce the rule of law against them occupying certain areas that they wouldn't allow developers to go on because they couldn't prove an actual treaty with them. So usually it ended up they were being bought off at the end.
Yeah.
But, I mean, in reality, I don't know how you can put a price on land. Everything comes from the land. and to take somebody's fiat legal tender payoff for it, just kind of to an extent could show how far things have gone, that people's spirituality has been affected, and they ended up being bought off for a price, thinking, well, they need this money that they've entrusted or taken from a group or people from the past who were behind it, who literally obliterated them off the surface of it if they could. Millions upon millions of natives were completely exterminated to get them out of the way so they wouldn't even be on the land, because they were a speed bump to someone taking it over by Roman conquering techniques, where you either abide by what I say or I kill you. And so basically by force duped them into signing treaties with them to agree that they say they own the land, which was a lie, because they never believed they owned the land in their spiritual concept. And therefore they believed they were of the land or part of the land, and to put down the fact they owned it was a lie right off the top. And then to say they were going to transfer ownership over to the British, and now the British would be their trustees, and then they would reserve them the land back, put them on a federal reserve on a little corner piece of property that they would give them a few benefits and privileges. Was kind of a ridiculous thing, but that's what happened to everybody.
Well, there was no paper to pass in the first place. There was no fiction to pass.
So what would I do if I'm going to dupe you on this? I need you to sign something on my side. So I need you to say that you authorize what we're about to do, and put your, put basically some formal signature of some sort to show consent, and then basically away we go. Now, if the party that you're trusting in is not trustworthy, which is pretty much welcome to all the G20 nations and all the guys basically that know that they've been able to drive honest people into a fraudulent scheme to turn them into nothing more than every man for himself debtors. It's not by chance trillions of dollars in debt worldwide, though no one can explain it. You try to talk to the experts, they don't know how I got there. But technically, if I'm using property under a name that's not my name, well, then I'm indebted. And that's why we've spent so much time trying to talk about the name, because most people don't realize that the surname is after acquired property. It's not what was given to you at birth. Your God-given name is unalienable. You cannot be put any debt on. It's paid for. God is not a debtor. And all his subjects that are of him, his sons, his daughters, his children, are debt-free. They're free of charge. But unfortunately, if they do not know who their God is and what their law is, then they enter into covenants with foreign, pagan, Gentile, unbeliever, heathen, infidels, who would sell their own mother for 10 cents.
Well, it's not unlike the history of our country, where if you have an Indian chief who's getting a little kickback on the underside, and he signs away for his people all of the rights and properties. I guess it's not too different than considering our quote-unquote fathers, our founding fathers. I know you don't like that word, but that is what people still call them. And it's a very similar thing, because, of course, you had that Declaration of Independence that did declare that all men are created equal, all that stuff. But see, that was talking about a man with a God-given name. That wasn't talking about a man who appears in a person, who appears as a surety for an artificial being. That changes the whole game. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
Stop tyranny, then what you waiting for? We've already stripped you of your liberty, privacy, civil rights, and dignity. You want some more?
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here is that you're a world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Because you can do it. Relax, let it flow. Think like water.
All right, folks, welcome back.
Relax, let it flow.
So again, of course, the whole thing that happened back then in those days, the founding of this country, this nation, it becomes a little bit obvious as to what was happening, because again, you had to have a choice. You had to have a choice to give your soul away, to assign it over in signature to the United States. They had to do it incrementally, and they had to do it in a way that would surpass the generations. In other words, one generation can't warn the other, because obviously culture changes so quick, generationally speaking, that one generation can hardly communicate now with the other. And so for my generation to try to communicate with the new generations might be perceived as, he's a grumpy old man, or he's one of them patriot conspiracy theory dudes. Whereas the older generations than me, I would have thought the same thing about them at my age. So really what happened was that they established this sense of quote-unquote independence, of unalienability, and then provided the very thing that could take that away. And, of course, when you read the Constitution, that's really all it does. All it says is how to take away the rights that it lists. It constantly lists, all the things that it lists, the privileges that it lists. It then, of course, goes on and says, well, except in the case of due process, in the case of, unless the national emergency, requires it, we'll give you due process and we'll give you all that stuff, unless or except. And so, the whole thing was set up, including the patent office, to literally make property out of people. And it's a hard history lesson to really grasp and to really fully admit to, I think, for a lot of people, because we have this such an incredible romanticism with our supposed culture. I read you the quotes from Abraham Lincoln about slavery. I've read so many things. There's no way that people can possibly still think that there was anything natural or godlike in the founding of the United States, Washington, D.C. It's so far from it. I shun to think that at some point I would have agreed that this country, the Constitution, was a document that was inspired by God, or whatever the current meme of the day is. But it's quite the opposite. It's incredibly against all that we talk about here today, and it's incredibly against that original declaration as well. So, Daniel, we're born, and at that point we're innocent. So let's go through this again, man. What's going on now? We don't blame our parents. Our parents don't know any better, just like we don't know. Most of us don't know any better. But at the same time, we're basically being thrown into a fraud. We're being manipulated and brainwashed, mind controlled through school and everything else to participate in a fraud we don't understand. And we, of course, hit the magic age of consent, and all of a sudden we sort of step in, we fulfill our destiny set up by the corporation, and we just kind of fill out. It's like an assembly line practically. Second, we get our little beanie cap from graduation, we step into the age of consent, and all of a sudden we're just good little citizens. It's a pretty incredible system when you think about it, huh?
Well, I think we look at. You mentioned the Constitution, and I know that here in Canada, many people put a lot of serious faith in what they call a Constitution. Strangely, when I started to research that word, I didn't get very warm with that one either. That was kind of like getting when I found out that smart meant injury, not intelligence. Job meant official public business for private dishonest gain, robbery. Well, constitute means to set up. So I just call that right off the top a setup. And you know what a setup is.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's to put someone in debt. Now, that can obviously mean several different things, but for the most part, a constitution in Bouvier's is defined as a debt compact. Nothing else, nothing more.
Yeah. So when people are even researching, and again, my background my due diligence and my life again goes back to the Bible, and I really try to admonish the audience that no matter what someone may have told them about that book, if they haven't done their due diligence to read it, they're really not going to see what's going on out there. And so, unfortunately, the world's reading 90% fiction novels of people, keeping their minds in waste and nonsense from other mixed up people. And unfortunately, they're not going to where the only message that's coming from the highest source that could only explain things that no man can explain, where languages came from, various aspects of man's journey through pain and suffering due to his own cause. Because when we do not do our due diligence and then we just move forward on things, then we end up walking into pit holes that could be a setup by someone trying to trap us. And if someone's intent is to have me in a very, very negative system with them, they could do their utmost to contrive and create a conspiracy to do this to me. But if we look at it, in conspiracy is another synonym for treason. So if I'm in an inalienable position, Clint, unalienable, you cannot put an encumbrance on me. Wouldn't you like to trick me, get me to prostrate and and enter into a prostitution, into something where you get me to leave that safe position and go into unsafe, thinking that it is safe?
Well, it would be in my best interest as a profit model to get you to become a chattel, yes. So,
in the background, at least where it appears that some of the history where some of the people that I probably have some history with that came here to Canada, we call the New World, they came from background of what appears to be angles. We call them angles because they always had an angle. And they're the guys that came up with angling, which was putting out a line and a hook, because they were really good at being prostitutes, hookers. And they would put some bait on the hook to trick something, to trick a fish to take the bait. And then they could reel them in. Well, they can't reel you in if you don't take the bait. And the bait The bait is the surname, right? The bait is combining yourself with the fiction. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic
Corporation Nation. Want to say hello to the chat room. That is corporationnation.chattango.com. That's CHATANGO. Always good stuff in there. Again, my guest today is Daniel. His YouTube site is Christian Remedy in Law. Lots of good little videos on there that I highly recommend, actually. It's what first turned me on to Daniel. So, Daniel, we're basically saying, well, we left off with you basically, or me basically tricking you into, fooling you into combining yourself, your I am, with my property, my intellectual property, which is the surname, thus creating a unique kind of corporate bond that creates, well, what we've been talking about, the position of surety and debted and bondedness. And of course, again, this is what this country was founded upon. I find that actually very disturbing.
I know it's Clint, I think we've both gone through probably some real moral conscience issues. And you know what, that's I think the first important beginning for the listeners to say, do they not feel something's wrong out there?
Everybody does.
And I don't believe that they would be truthful if they didn't say they're feeling extremely uncomfortable out there with the sign of the times of what's occurring. If you look at the overall economic system, it appears no one's really explaining it. They don't know why. Where's this debt? Who is it owed to? You never really get that on the news. You just hear about there being debt and there's a deficit and how are we going to make the deficit, and the leaders sitting down in these conferences and then coming back to the people, and it never gets solved. And it doesn't make any sense how any country, if it truly was, if we wanted to call it sovereign, how could a sovereign or a nation that is such be in debt unless somehow the original leaders or the ones that were involved in the idea of the sovereignty of that nation were not somehow entering into some kind of agreement or encumbrances, maybe based on their past spending arrangements, how they financed their expansions of these colonies, of which they used very poor, uneducated people to build. And I think if they trace the whole thing, they're going to see that it's something based on a fictitious eminent domain under something that is not real, and that they believe that they're part of that. And myself growing up, coming from a religious household, it did not make sense to me that the one that I studied the most about in the Bible, which was Christ, who said, my kingdom or government not of this world, and then you've got a large, huge population of people worldwide calling themselves Christians who say they are of the world, and they'll claim that they're Americans or Australians or Russians or whatever. And I just don't get it. No part of the world is no part of the world. So how did we become part of the world? Well, we had to have consented in some manner to have shown activity to do that. And if the world's in debt, because I know God couldn't be in debt, I don't think a tree's in debt, a squirrel's not in debt, but somehow man's in debt. Well, that's a fiction. And there's no possible way the planet could be in debt. It's in trouble with pollution, polluted knowledge, polluted ways, polluted activities on it. But it's not due to the reality of what things are. It's based on, even at this point right now, even on the pollution, all artificial things man's making that he can't seem to get rid of. So where do we go from there? I mean, Clint, at the end of the day, if people don't see the reality in front of them, how do we speak to them? So we've had numerous discussions, myself and Mladen, with people, and we'll show them obvious things. Like we'll say, do you realize that a coat of arms and a family surname has a charge on it? And they don't realize that that is itself a symbol of a fee, a feudal fee or a charge. If I use something that belongs to someone else and it's not mine, isn't it interesting that we're brought to a court to be charged with a fee for doing something? We have licenses to use other people's property, but we somehow think we need a license to be ourselves. No, you need a license to impersonate or take on the name or property or use of someone else's property.
Exactly. Now, Ezra Pound, whatever your opinion, he has a very good quote. He says that wars in old times were made to get slaves. The modern implement of imposing slavery is debt. And I think that's important to comprehend here, is that over the last few centuries, there's been a slow incremental change in the way that slavery has been implemented into a society. And even especially in this particular society, because the entertainment industry is such an integral part. Again, entertainment means, etymology means to enter and hold the mind. Entertain, ment, or mentis. So, you watch a show, and this behavior of ours is reinforced. The debt slavery is reinforced in every way possible, and we actually grow up with our favorite television characters, even cartoons, basically programming us to be debt slaves, as opposed to being the type of slaves that are pushed around and whipped. So, I mean, we're all these words, of course, are the that we're speaking of, are the trap that happens, and it's just a nightmare, really.
It is. When I started to go down the research of the words, I started to realize that I had missed the picture, from the past, because I spent probably a good 44 years of my life not seeing it. And when I started to take a real serious look, morally, spiritually, at where I was going, I realized that most of the things that I had said or done in the past were so alarming based on the words I had used that I didn't know what they were, and therefore proceeding with them aimlessly, blindly, could lead me into serious problems. So we've kind of walked on to an enticed monopoly board where they need your voluntary consent, because we know monopolies are supposedly banned, but not when you enter into them voluntarily. So what did I volunteer into that put me into a lien position, so that I would be away from my unalienable position? And when I realized that the only thing that they can use to convey in their society to take on debt is with a fictional added-on after-acquired name, which would label me now a debtor instead of with an absolute debt-free position that I was before I took that on, it opened my eyes. So let's look at it this way. If I have something in my name that would identify me holding the debt of another, even though I may not be in knowledge of it and ignorant of it, and we know ignorance is no excuse in the eyes of the law. Ignorance of the fact there is an excuse. So I would say that the majority of people are ignorant of the fact that their God-given name is not chargeable. But they may be ignorant of the fact or ignorant of the law for using something that would be forbidden of them.
Right. We're going to take a break.
Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about. What the object is all about.
Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems in the form of energy, sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. Explodes into this enormous collage, and in this moment we are perfect. We are whole, and we are beautiful.
It appears rather gruesome, wrinkled like a walnut, and with
E pluribus unum. E pluribus unum. Out of many, one. Annuit conceptus. Announcing the birth of Novos Ordo Seclorum. The new order or cycle of the ages. Now, does that sound like something that you want your government to have upon its, we'll just call it what it is, its holy script, within its articles? Well, folks, out of many, one. In other words, forming the central government was to take the singularity of each state or colony and to place each one under the jurisdiction, of course, of the United States. Out of many, one. We don't have 50 states. We have one giant conglomerate corporation now. Announcing the birth of the new order, the cycle of the ages. You know, this was all, if you haven't checked out my very long essay, it took me months and months to the first two parts anyway. It's called Cracking the Cult of the Constitution. I highly, highly recommend, if you want to get a real understanding of who really started this country, this nation we call the United States. Of course, the city of Philadelphia, where it all began, being called the City of Brotherly Love, which is a Masonic term. I highly recommend that you check that out because, of course, Masonry, the under different names, predates Christianity, and you need to really go back in history to understand that this foe, the synagogue of Satan, if you will, has been with us for a very, very long time. Now, it's interesting because the word, we hear these words all the time. We don't think to look them up generally in a legal sense. But you have words like sacrilege. Sacrilege is defined in Bouvier's 1856, which is the Dictionary Act commissioned by Congress. It is a sacrilege, the act of stealing the temples or churches dedicated to the worship of God, comma, articles consecrated to divine uses. Oh, articles. Why does that sound so... Oh, yeah, that's right. Articles of Confederation. Oh, that's right. The Articles, 7 of them, I believe, in the Constitution. Huh. Isn't that interesting? And is there a reason? I mean, do you really think, folks, that the purpose for these two statements, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, and no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States? Do you really think that was to protect you? No, this is the same rules that are in a Masonic lodge, you see. This is as ancient can get. Back to the days of worshiping Baal and the sun gods. This is what we're talking about today. Transcends the 1611 Bible, goes before biblical times even, and so we really have to get a grasp on that this has been going on within similar systems. The concept of pledging, the concept of bonding, and again, the different forms of slavery, from chattel slavery to debt slavery to just physical bondage slavery. It's just a different form of the same old game being played by the same old players. And all of the constitutions prior to the Constitution that was created here were all Masonic documents as well. You can verify that by looking into the Book of Constitutions, a Masonic book. The sacramentum is an oath. What does sacra mean? In Roman law, the right to participate in the sacred rites of the city. Why do you think these guys take an oath? They're taking an oath to their Lord, not to God, but to their landlord. They're becoming employees, basically. The right to participate in the sacred rites of the city. That's R-I-T-E. What is a rite? From Latin ritus, a religious custom. We have a government, Daniel, that it does almost everything like a church. It pretends to act like a church. In fact, we discovered that the civil law, what we call the pagan law, was created within the church to deal with things that weren't ecclesiastical. And basically what they did when they came over here was just to create a completely pagan law without acknowledgement of the natural realm whatsoever. I mean, the United States literally has nothing to do with nature. Is that about correct?
Yep. These are all artificial, made up, make believe. Just remember, when someone's trying to force you to go down a certain path, force you. And I hope that what we're doing here, just talking and educating people from what we found. We're not trying to force anybody on anything. We're just saying, please do some due diligence and research. But when a side wants to force you down something, and the Romans were very forceful, they were armed forces, and they would make you believe, and that's what the Catholic Church did. The Roman Catholic Church would go into places that no one had even heard of them, and they would go into villages and rape and pillage and burn people, and put so much fear into the village that they now said, you will believe, because I'm going to make you believe, and that's called make-believe. That's not called believers.
So we're all playing.
God doesn't make you believe. He hopes you will believe in him, but he does not make you believe. So bad guys will make you believe. And so they will force imposition, duties, and encumbrances on those who do not know what is going on, right or wrong. And so conscience is the most important thing to remember, because conscience is your own self-judgment inside between what you know to be morally right or wrong. And when I woke up and realized that if I am involved in what we operate everything on, which is called legal fiction, that's called a nice fancy way of a legal lie. So what the wonderful, snaking, parasitical lawyers who work for the bad side, the evil in high places as spoken of in Scripture, the bad guys who conspired against Christ and their ancestors, who are still out there doing the money changing in everybody's temple, set up a nice little scheme. They said, guess what? We'll let you think that you'll be okay by entering into our little scheme of fiction. But what we need you to do is to believe that your God-given name is the same as the surname. They're identical. And then we can create identity, which means sameness, and then we'll get you to sign to it, although the fact is they're really not the same. So we will run law instead of grace, penalties and fees instead of forgiveness. And what we will do is we will tell you that this formula is truth is really now a lie, because we're going to create a lie name, and it cannot be disproved. So in the world of the lawyers who do not make anything without you believing in a lie to get a penalty, they basically have created a schematic called a fiction.
We're going to a break, Daniel. We'll be back here. It'll be a long break, so smoke them if you got them. Stay tuned, folks.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men. Machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Choose the power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint, your host, and with me today is Daniel, Christian name Daniel, and Christian Remedy at Law is the YouTube channel. You want to check out some of his short videos that are really fantastic. I was just going back over this little word. It's kind of a funny word because we don't think of it. We like to think of our system of law as more unique than, as if it was created just for us because we're such a special kind of name. No, not so much. Sacra, again, in Roman law, the right to participate in the sacred rites, rites, of the city. Of course, that's referring to religious custom. Black's Law Force expounds upon this, really lets you know where it comes from, the sacramentum or the oath. In Roman law, an oath as being a very sacred thing. The oath taken by soldiers to be true to their general and their country. Oh, well, that sounds familiar. We read the oaths the other day. They take an oath to their president or to their superior offices and to their constitution, not to the countries. If they were taking an oath to their country, they'd be taking an oath to their state in which they live in. But that's not the case. They're taking an oath to the Constitution, the founding document, the charter of that corporation. No way do these people, from police to politicians to military, take an oath. As they did in Rome, they today take an oath, the oath taken by soldiers to be true to their general and their country, not the people. Don't be mistaken. And one of the formal methods of beginning an action at law, legus actionis, known to the early Roman jurisprudence, the sacramentum, was a sum of money deposited in court by each of the litigating parties as a kind of wager or forfeit to abide the result of the suit. The successful party received back his stake, the losing party forfeited his, and it was paid into the public treasury to be expended for sacred objects, sacris rebus, hence the name. And finally, it says, at common law, the sacramentum is an oath. Yeah, when you go in there, you're taking an ancient Roman pledge or oath to uphold a system that's been alive since way before Rome even existed. We're talking, like you said, this is an ancient system of pledging. The sum of money deposited into a court. Well, they don't have to do that anymore, Daniel, because they have control of our bank accounts. They've everything's in our names, in our corporate names. We've basically handed it over to them. The banks are all in agreement. The banks now collect taxes, and property taxes for the government through the mortgage payments. I mean, nothing has changed. Is the point? The only thing that's changed is the technological power and, well, skullduggery, the hidden part of it to really make people not see what's happening. I mean, at least a slave with shackles on knows. He knows that he's a slave. Might not like it, but he knows. That's the big difference between us and those people back then, our ancestors, because we just don't seem to know or understand that a constitution is a debt compact, and that's exactly what it made us, debt slaves. Right?
Oh. Anybody could put it, Clint. I mean, when we're serving money and not serving something spiritual, we've already gone against at least when people are thinking, I know there's a lot of people in the U.S. who are thinking that their country was founded on, the belief in the Bible. But if the Bible said you can't serve God in money or mammon, then I'd understand that why the term secular means godless, without God. Nothing spiritual at that point. So if I've got God in my name on one side, and I've got something of a secular, pagan, feudal lord with a fee and a debt on the other side, wouldn't I be kind of in a conflict between which master I'm serving?
A conflict of interest.
And so at that point, I mean, we can understand now, it gives us at least a better understanding, because a lot of people don't know how the debt has been racked up. So if I keep on touching something that's not mine, and I really don't have the ability because it's not mine to begin with, and I'm only given a tool that could never really pay it off, and what if I was set up on this? It was a setup for me to take on a debt, and all they do is give me debt money to try to pay the debt with, and all it does is create more debt. And therefore, we have compound interest rate for having a compound name, which puts us in a compound prisoner of our own mind, because we've entered into somebody else's house of debt. So if I'm in someone else's house with my debt-free property, and I walk in and I say I want to be in someone's in-debt house, and I don't mind taking on the debt, and I want to hold legal title for their name, well, I just found out that I just walked into Black's Law definition of dummy, which I'm going to read really slow. He who holds legal title for another. That's a dummy. So, Americans, Canadians, G20 nation participants, if you are holding legal title for another, well, your God-given name is not legal, it's illegal. It's grace, because grace is opposite to legal, according to Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. Grace being opposite to legal. So opposite of legal, when you look it up, is illegal. So your Christian name is illegal in their world, and they needed to legalize you so that you would be legal to use their name. And then, once they legalized you to use their name, then you could take over debt.
Well, now let me just let me just play devil's advocate here, because the Bureau of Public Debt in this country quotes Alexander Hamilton. Well, how could he be wrong? He's the one that founded this nation, right? He's one of those dudes. He says, quote, "The United States debt, both foreign and domestic, was the price of liberty." What say ye to that, Daniel?
Well, all I can say right now is someone who bears a name with their given name of rank and says something like that smells to me. Smells very rank. Ding.
It might have been his idea to put "In God We Trust" on the dollar as well.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Remember, in God we trust, all others, pay cash, right? So
Absolutely.
There's an opposite between which side our trust is on, but the thing to remember is if I take on something that has charge in it.
We're going to go to break, Daniel. Hold that thought. Stay tuned, folks.
Is this real, or is this rhyme? The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's the rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real, it's the rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love.
Welcome back, folks, to the Corporation Nation. Oh, so Daniel, I'm sorry. We seem to cut you off for these commercials.
I think
Please
what
continue.
we've been trying to get through at this point is I'm going to make a couple points really short, and then we can probably go wherever you want to go with the direction, maybe with callers possibly. But one of the things that people have to understand is that the Bible clearly, if they're going from a Bible level, and we're only talking right now, and I'm not going to, we're not here, like you said, we're not here to Bible thump anybody. But in the event they're saying that they believe they're founding fathers of the U.S., nation or constitution, or the British monarchy or anything else were founded on the idea of the belief in God and the Bible is the supreme law. Well, the Bible was very clear in the book of Job, and we mentioned this on a previous show, Job 32. I always used to kind of say it's interesting that it's also spelled the same as job. And Job 32, 21 and 22 says, "Let me not, I pray you, accept any man's person, neither let me give flattering titles unto man. For I know not to give flattering titles. In so doing, my Maker would soon take me away." Now, when we research that word, the flattering title, man's person, that title in Hebrew transliterated into English came up with surname. So if we read into that, directly putting that word in there instead of man's person or title, we'd find out that God told us not to accept any surname. And in the event we would do so, even giving one to somebody, our Maker would take us away, speaking of God. So I would take that as a pretty good direct command from God not to have a surname. And then when I found out surname was debtor, I started to realize how they run the charges, the debt, the duties, and the fees. So let's go the next step. If I have a surname which has a coat of arms, which has a charge in it, and I get rid of that name, I just hand it back because it's not mine to whoever the appropriate property master is of that in this bad movie I woke up into. And I just gave it back, cut it loose, severed it, relinquished it, quit claiming it any further. Well, if I gave it back and it's got a debt attached to it, and I hand it back to the one whose property it really is, well, I would be free of charge, wouldn't I?
Well, I question that actually, because if you charge up a debt, and I'm using that word loosely, if you create the debt, and then say, well, I no longer want to be responsible for the debt I've incurred, I do question that, because we read about government considers honor the paying of a debt.
Okay.
Not paying it is dishonorable. So
okay, so we'll go to the next level on this. Okay, so I'm using something that's not truly mine, and I'm being surety for it, because that's all I could be at that stage. If it's not really absolutely my property, you have to remember that it's not my property. I can claim it to be my property, but mere belief can misrepresent a fact. So it doesn't mean it is my property. I could be surety for another and surely injure myself for it according to Scripture. He who is surety for another will surely smart for it. Suretyship is considered the precursor of ruin to society according to all the books that talk about suretying. Okay, so if I'm being surety for someone else's property, and it's already in an insurmountable debt before I touch it, well, technically me being surety for it doesn't mean it's mine. It just means I've claimed it to be mine, and therefore someone else already has to have it, because it had to be someone else's before I suretied it, which means they must be the co-surety, which could make this very kosher. So I would just say that is the reality of it. We've walked into believing that something is ours from the beginning, which it isn't, and that's where the problem lies. And that's why the cost of everything that you're seeing out there seems to be the most unexplainable thing going on, because someone can run all those numbers at any way they want because it's their property to do as they please with, and they're allowing you to basically take it on by consent. And if I'm already in a losing battle right off the top, taking on that debt because I really don't even know how much debt attached to it, I'm just guessing at what I have in it, but we really don't know what's behind the scenes. If it's someone else's property, they don't have to tell you. I could walk in and assume someone's debt, but it didn't mean that I was told all to deal with it. Many people have bought corporations.
Let me just add that, one of my favorite quotes that's actually in the Congressional Record, and this dates back to March 9th, 1933, when they were doing all the stuff that I've talked about with emergency powers and Congress basically saying, okay, President, do what you want, declare an emergency, it's good, you have dictatorial powers. Congressman Patman, speaking to the Record, he says the money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. You hear that, folks? What does government consider its legal tender, that thing that it spreads out amongst you? The money represents a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people in the nation. You want to know why they say, in God we trust? Because a trust is a contract. It's a contractual relationship. It's equitable right, title, or interest in property, real or personal, distinct from its legal ownership or its personal obligation for paying, delivering, or performing anything, where the person, in other words, the citizen, trusting, that's all of you who are citizens, has no real right or security, for by that act he confides altogether to the faithfulness of those entrusted. Whoa! An obligation upon a person arising out of a confidence reposed in him to apply property faithfully. When land is purchased by one man in the name of another. This is where the surname comes in. The man purchases in the name of the surname, the government property, and the former pays the consideration money. The land will in general be held by the grantee in trust for the person who has so paid the consideration money. In other words, if you use the dollar, which is government's money, to pay for a house, you are using that of another to gain something. Therefore, it will be in a mortgage, just as Congressman Patman said in 1933. A mortgage on all the homes and other property of the people in the nation. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. You every time you buy something, whether a large purchase, whether it be a car or, well, heck, anything you buy on your credit card. In other words, it all belongs to government. Technically, you're using someone else's IOU money to buy something. It all belongs to them. We'll be back, folks.
Hi, neighbor. Welcome again to this neighborhood. I'd like to show you something. You know what this is? Or maybe if I press this button. There are so many things to learn about in this world, and so many people who can help us learn, and so many people who can help us learn. Did you ever grow anything in the garden of your mind? You can grow ideas in the garden of your mind.
Welcome back, folks. Here to Corporation Nation. Phone number is 1-800-313-9443. Again, 800-313-9443. If you want to talk to Daniel, ask a question, whatever you like. I was just looking up. Is it fair, Daniel, to say that... Oh, I've got a naughty cat. Sorry about that. I lost my place. Is it fair to say that the government sits in the position of the trustee over just about everything that we think is ours?
Well, I would say yes, that's accurate. They're the signing authorities when the two names are put together, because that's the crossing between who you are individually and who the state needs to place a tag on as a value under their nation. So in other words, just consider the national fiction background that we made up all these backgrounds on, all these different countries and whatever. We just use the surname as the tag. So that's the Gentile tag name.
A trustee is defined as one to whom an estate has been conveyed in trust. Now, we could say that the word estate really applies to everything that we put in our artificial name. So, and of course, the word conveyance is a contract, or it's a transfer of title by one person to another, and of course, it lets you know that can be a corporation as well. So, I mean, really, when we're talking about government as trustee, it's because we purchase through a credit card, through a bank. We use a system. We agree to the banking system by signing our little signature card at the bank, which is a whole contract that we don't even know about. We agree to the banking laws, and we agree that we are basically conveying our property over to government each time we use its services. What is its service? Well, it's the right to use the dollar. Really?
Yeah, I mean, Clint, to an extent what's happened is, consider I'm private on my given name that I was given at birth, and then I attach onto a name that belongs to the state, and that's public. So really what we've got private-public going on. So I've been offered, to an extent, under the Social Security program, to enter into taking private claim to public debt. So I'll take a private grab at whatever the debt is for the use of the public share of that name I use in common with others in that system. So it's kind of a very strange thing to see, but you see, if the ones who are offering you this are offering you something that really is not real, but it's fictitious, and you sign on to it, consent removes mistake. So I can't say it's fraud. I can't say, oh, they duped me when I'm participating. So the only options I really have is I hand back what's not mine back to whoever's it is and cut it loose, because then I'm not in debt, because if I don't know how to pay it and I don't know what to do with it, and I'm in an aggregate of people who have trillions of dollars of this in debt now, as a group, what we're talking about, as a nation in calamity such as the U.S. right now, that could probably explode at any time with their dollar, it goes, the whole world economy goes with it. I would say that, what would you do if you were on this Titanic ship?
Well, I mean, basically what you're saying is the old sort of adage that, you know, the more things you accumulate, you find that your things own you as opposed to you owning your things, because the more things you have, likely the more debt you're going to have, because most people, well, I speak from personal experience anyway, most people, I believe, live beyond their means through the concept of credit, which of course is just a big fish hook that everybody bites because it looks so delicious, tasty.
Right, so I mean, do you really believe right now that the United States can pay their debt?
Well, that's a whole other conversation, and that's actually one of my special areas of, if you will, expertise, and that's, you know, most of that is bull crap. I mean, they can write off the debt anytime they want to. If you're going to get technical about the debt, it doesn't really exist. It's all figures and imagination. We don't owe, you know, we owe government debt. Government owes government most of the debt. So it's a really ridiculous concept, to be honest. I mean, it could go away tomorrow if Congress just voted to completely, you know, have a jubilee and destroy all debt. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Now, reality, they like debt, and I think these people want to bring us to our knees, so the money is being used as a control tool. But in reality, it could be gone tomorrow if they wanted to. And
our trust in men would lead us to believe yes or no to that.
Well, yeah. That's,
do you really believe that man who, anyways, you know, let's face it, we had a little discussion one time very quickly that would say that people would say government is corrupt, man is corrupt, and I'm going, well, yeah, because man's body is decaying all the time into corruption. He eventually ends up 6 feet under, from dust you are to dust you return for being so industrious against God.
Yeah.
So that's where Adam ended up, and that's where all those that were down the same path ended up, and we're all in that same situation if we don't wake up to this.
Government is an undertaker. It takes care of and underwrites all of its artificial persons. It takes care of the dead. That's what it does.
Which is what a corporation is. It's corporate debt.
Absolutely.
So,
hey, let's go to the phone lines. We've got Fred in Iowa. Welcome to the show, Fred.
Hi, Clint. Hey, Danny. When the body, Daniel, when the body dies, at that instant, what happens?
Well, according to Scripture, the dead is dead. The body goes into decay. Okay, our life force only came from God, so I would just say we're in God's hands at that point. I mean, if we're looking scripturally, I mean, we're going into some deep stuff here now when we start talking about resurrection, bringing someone back from the dead at a certain time. That's promised in Scripture, but that's God's timing. Speaks about it when the millennial reign of Christ comes. But
Hey, you're pretty close. You're pretty right on. The dead know nothing. They're sleeping. They know nothing.
That's right.
Till Christ return. I got a question for Clint.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Clint, and this isn't argumentative. Have you read the Bible?
I'm in the process now. I've said it many times before. I was one of I'm in a generation that I was taught, basically, through media and everything else, conditioning, that the Bible was basically akin to the church. So I disregarded the Bible, threw it out with the bathwater, basically. Now that I'm relearning, I'm starting to read it.
A story on me, I can identify and understand where you're coming from very, very easy. And I'm not trying to butter you up, but that fine mind, that inquisitive mind, and your facility with words and looking them up, use that. But read the Bible.
Absolutely.
But you'll need a little help, and I'm not trying to denigrate your intellect whatsoever. Now, let me give you an example of me, Clint. When I was a young man, the word I hated the most was faith. Because I thought, who or any idiot could go on blind faith? Yeah. And I used to get so mad I'd hear these TV evangelists, and I'm 76 years old. And I thought, well, if I wanted to make money and have a Cadillac or a Lincoln and wear a $500 suit, now that was a pretty big thing then, I'd become a preacher. But I couldn't be that unscrupulous. And it took me a long time to find out through life's history. And what turned me on when I went to a prophecy seminar is my background and my knowledge and my belief or non-belief in politics and how the world.
Well, hold that thought, Fred. We're going to go to a break. We'll be back, folks. Stay tuned.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion despite protests and clashes in Athens streets. The IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece, where in fact the
all right, folks, welcome back.
Our language from the Greek
You're in the Corporation Nation.
Management. Well,
we still have Fred on the phone. The word faith, Fred, I'm sure that you'll probably get to this, but you've probably found since that faith actually is a financial instrument, that we are basically put into a position of faith and credit. all of us in our property out here, it's a pledge or oath that we're basically all considered to be the chattel of government is really what faith actually boils down to. What were you going to say, sir?
Program. I understand. Dan, you'll understand this, and then I'll come back to Clint. You can't talk in sound bites. It's not that I am a theologian or that bright, but when I asked you about the state of the dead, I think you know. And you know there's some things it takes days and weeks to cover. But get back to Clint. I ask you this question. Do you think a person, there's any prerequisite or a condition for love?
Do I think there's a prerequisite?
Or a condition to have love?
Well, that's a pretty deep question. I'm going to answer
my own question. You can't have love unless you have free will. It's impossible. People could have $1 billion and buy your love, but you can't have love unless you have free will. And we have free will. And I'm going to jump in there again, Clint. Gosh darn, the way I understand you, you're searching with an honest heart, and you're blessed with intellect. Read the Bible. Now, even with all your intellect, you're going to need a little help. But do it, and then to put it this way, both sides of the story. And You can't explain all this stuff in sound bites, Clint. You're on the air 5 days a week, for months. And to get your point across and explain the sovereign man and faith and all this, which is important for people to know. But know the other side, even if you consider it your enemy, which it is not in my belief, you know what the enemy is doing.
Well, I agree with you, Fred. Thanks for the call. Like I said, it took me this long to really understand that the Bible is literally the most important book I could ever read because so much is based upon it. How could a person of even my age, unless they had parents that drove that into them, have possibly ever wanted to pick up the Bible? It's just culturally, it has been ingrained into me to demonize the thing. So, I'm not making any defenses for myself, and I'm saying I'm getting the help now so that I can understand. Before I start reading this thing, I really want to understand the terms and the stuff that's in that thing. Now that I'm actually reading it, and keep in mind, I have several versions. I even have a Masonic version, which I find the most interesting because it's brutally honest. It's becoming a daily routine for me to at least read a few verses. I don't think I'll ever be one of those people that can memorize the verses. I don't really have that kind of intellect, but I'm getting there. And so again, I appreciate all the help I am getting from the audience, from my guests, and everything else. Let's take Eric in California. Welcome, show, Eric.
Hello, gentlemen. Public Law 97-280. Congress declared the Bible as the Word of God. I'll listen offline. Thanks.
What do you say to that, Daniel?
Well, it's great. Canada has in its constitution, it says, or at least its charter, it says, it recognizes the supremacy of God. But you cannot exercise faith in God while you're using state property that may do something that's contrary to God. So if their laws are contrary to God's law and you're basically operating under their charter, the minute you go from faith, belief, into actually exercising it using their state or public property, you can be stopped. Because it could go against the belief of the aggregate.
I would also add to that what Congress says, the critters that inhabit the form of the corporation's souls that inhabit the halls of Congress, what they say are God or is the Word of God might not be the same God that you and I portray in our hearts. That's all I will say. It's like taking an oath to God. Well, you don't really know what's in the mind of a man, and if a man has sold his soul already, what difference would it make to him if he took an oath to God? That's my big problem with oaths in general. And of course, I was reading the story of I'm horrible with names and stuff, but I can't remember, but he swore an oath to Jesus, I think three or four times, and then of course he broke the oath, and Jesus had warned him that someone was going to break the oath, and he did. So the concept that Congress declares something, I would say that they're declaring the Lord God, in other words, the vicar, the replacement, the earthly figures, because they want to play God. So you have to be really careful when you're looking at that type of thing, because remember they're only talking about legal stuff. They cannot declare what God is, who God is, because there's a law in the Constitution that says they can't. So I don't believe that for a second. I'll be perfectly honest. It does, however, mean that the Bible can be used in court, and that is absolutely one of the most important aspects of this. Let's take Ron in Washington. Ron, welcome to the show.
Clint, I want to go back about 15 minutes. You mentioned about the Congress, I should say the United States having a mortgage on all the land, blah, blah, blah. And then you have that phrase, the supreme law of the land. Once you read the Organic Laws and Ed Rivera, if you read it, and I followed it in the Washington Constitution, talking about in this state, within this state, etc., the land they're talking about is not all the land on Earth or all the land in the entire land mass. They're talking about their land. I know that because you look at land patents, unless all the land patents are lies, and they're signed by presidents, and from 1846 on through the current time, it tells you that land is granted forever to have and to hold. And I would maintain that that land is not their land. They only have the land that they own, and they say that in Article 1, Section 4, Clause 17. They talk about the district, 10 miles square. They talk about the land they purchase for forts, etc. And let's put the Libre Code aside for a minute, but let's say that the land they talk about is their land. Don't presume it's all of the land. That's what my comment is.
Well, I would answer that by saying no one owns land. There is no such thing as ownership. There is a privilege granted by a governing body politic, sort of like a corporation is granted the power to incorporate, supposedly to benefit the people, although we know that's completely been altered to basically mean for profit against the people. But I say no one owns any land. I think Daniel would probably agree with me. There is no such thing as ownership of land. You can't own the land. You can only own a piece of paper with the signature.
Well, when I say ownership, I mean as humans, we can control it and have proprietorship over it. I'm not questioning that the Lord has it, not at all. But I'm saying on Earth, we have that control over the land, and we happen to call it casually ownership. And so when they say a mortgage on the land, they're talking about their land, not the land of the inhabitants.
Remember, when we dissected the word land, we found out that it actually meant corporation as well. So land isn't even a real a term that they're using because, again, they don't recognize land itself or soil. They only recognize something artificial, which is the title. So when they say law of the land, they really mean law of the Constitution, law of the corporation, law of the jurisdiction. Daniel, what say you, sir?
I would just say very simply, government acts as an idea of God. And
Daniel, I'm so sorry. We ran out of time, my friend. I didn't hear that music. Whoa. All right, folks. Take care. Thank you, Daniel, again for joining me tonight.